It's a special time for the middleweight division, as perhaps the most unique rivalry in combat sports gets its fourth helping. The UFC 287 headliner between Alex Pereira and Israel Adesanya. But what can we really hope to learn about a fight we've already seen played out 3 times?
It's time!
Well, as it turns out, quite a lot. The 3-0 advantage that Pereira has carved out does not give you any real idea of how this dynamic actually works. Sure, you can't discredit what Pereira has done, the punches he has landed, but Israel's ability to control and be technically superior against Poatan should not be overlooked. In fact, we have a feeling that Izzy is going to find a way to put it all together and finally come out with his hand raised against his great rival. Trusting in a fighter as proven, as experienced, and as well-rounded as him, Adesanya should not be a controversial pick. But people seem to see the 3-0 scoreline and instantly write this man off. Have we learned anything from the past? Just look at Juan Manuel Marquez's trilogy with Manny Pacquiao. Did anyone really think that he could finally pull off the KO in the 4th fight? No, it was a crazy outcome. And yet, people seem to think that Israel Adesanya's past performances in there with Poatan should be ignored in favor of Pereira's big moments. But Izzy has won the majority of the rounds in there with Pereira. In fact, it's not particularly close. If anyone needs to pull off a trick here, it's the champion Poatan. And to pull off a trick like that 4 times is going to take quite a lot. It's not that Pereira can't do it, in fact he should be favored going in. But there's a different intensity to Israel this time. Like he knows that he's hitting a real crossroads in his career, one that could make a defeat here utterly devastating to his future prospects. The man is training like his life depends upon it, and in some ways that's not far off the truth. Israel has had 25 pro MMA fights. He's by no means a newcomer or a part-timer. His position within the middleweight rankings is all he has right now, and looking back over each fight with Pereira, he is obviously quite aware of his ability to beat this man. Fight 1 under kickboxing rules was a tightly contested battle, but looking back on it now, it's pretty clear that Adesanya has a strong argument at having won the fight outright. Their second bout was similar to the third, in the way that Israel was seemingly having the most success up until, well, he wasn't. That fight goes far beyond one memorable highlight reel moment. Like Fight 3, Adesanya was proving himself to be the superior technician for the majority of the bout's runtime, using his superior skills to keep Pereira at bay. But with a guy as dangerous as him, he only needs one great moment to finally break through. And when it came, boy was it one hell of a shot. That left hook is widely considered to be the most dangerous weapon in combat sports, and when it landed on Israel's chin, he went down like a sack of potatoes. We all know what happened in the 3rd fight, the first in MMA. It was a similar story in some ways. Adesanya was having a large portion of the success, seemingly proving to the fans that he would not be caught out by Poatan's power again. But of course, with a sniper like Pereira in front of you, he only needs to be perfect in one exchange to turn the tide dramatically. Was it overconfidence on the last style-bender's part, or does Pereira just have a magnetic attraction to the finish? Well, if you ask us, we don't see history repeating itself here. The truly great fighters find a way to get the job done. And while Adesanya is 0-3 against Poatan, let's be real, they've only fought once in MMA. This is not the unassailable lead that people make it out to be. Adesanya should be favored to have the technical advantage once again, and we already know just how masterful he can be over 5 rounds. If he plays it smart, plays it safe, there's no reason why Lightning should strike again. And if he can get his hand raised and reclaim his belt, restoring order at 185 pounds, believe us when we tell you that Alex Pereira's MMA career could be in some serious trouble. And look, one loss is not going to be enough to ruin anyone's career on its own, but take a moment to remember exactly where Pereira's career as a mixed martial artist is. A quick look through what he has already accomplished and what lies in front of him is pretty alarming. Pereira made the switch to MMA after his 28th birthday, a pretty late start by any standard. But he didn't immediately take to his new sport with a natural flair. No, he was still very much focused on his kickboxing career at this point. And after losing by way of submission in his pro debut, he fought 2 more times to bring his record to 2-1 before taking a 4.5-year hiatus. and this time he of course became one of the world's pound-for-pound best kickboxers, returning to mixed martial arts at the age of 33, linking up with the legendary Glover Teixeira to round out his training. By this point, many people saw his decision to move to MMA as a reaction to Israel Adesanya becoming one of the biggest stars in the sport. It wasn't taken particularly seriously at first, as crazy as that might sound. However, it's not like Pereira has had a vast catalog of MMA outings since leaving kickboxing, and to say that he has been fast-tracked would be putting it lightly. This is not an experienced veteran in MMA, not by any means. Most fighters aren't even close to the UFC when they have 8 pro fights, and they sure are not in the later half of their 30s too. And while his commendable technical progress and clear athletic ability makes him a nightmare to certain matchups, there are some very noticeable shortcomings when you start to dig a little deeper. Now just 8 fights into his career, Pereira has only fought 3 fighters who are above an average UFC level. After debuting against Andreas Michailidis, who is no longer in the promotion, he followed up that flying knee victory with a win over a very credible opponent in Bruno Silva. That fight was a fun matchup that went to the judge's decision, a 3-round experience for Poatan that served him well in giving him cage time. His second legitimate victory came in the form of a fight with Sean Strickland, a matchup that, let's be real, was very much the best possible opponent for him in the entire top 15. It's not that Strickland didn't possess the tools to really make Pereira's night a long one. No, it's the fact that he could always be relied upon to throw his best possible game plan out the window and elect to stand his ground. Against a fighter like Pereira, that was always going to be a suicide mission. But hey, you gotta admire Strickland for sticking to his guns. Unfortunately, in this case, Pereira performed exactly as well as expected, and within the opening 5 minutes, he was landing over the KO'd Strickland, now officially ranked within the top 10. Look, we understand that the UFC sometimes have to give these fighters a push, and when you have the possibility to make a matchup like Adesanya vs Pereira 3 in a new sport, sometimes you just gotta make it happen. But here's where things get a little dicey for Poatan. Sure, he got the win over Adesanya last time around, and fair play to him, it was an amazing way to win the title. A shocking 5th round finish deserving of the highest praise. Nobody can take that away from Pereira, but let's not forget that Adesanya has shown himself time and time again to be more than capable of beating Pereira, only to fall short in pivotal moments. The thing that's worrying about Pereira's position within the sport is the question of what exactly happens if he cannot defeat Adesanya this time. All of a sudden, if the UFC don't opt to go for Fight 5, Pereira is left with 2 options. The first option is to take a contender fight within the middleweight top 5. And no, he can't just take on Sean Strickland again. All of a sudden, Poatan, who, let's remember, has never once faced a legitimate wrestling threat, will be in the mix against guys like Robert Whittaker and Marvin Vettori. Guys who can wrestle. Guys who aren't going to play the kickboxing game against Pereira. In fact, you could make the argument that Alex has already faced the 2 guys in the 185-pound top 15 who would actually try to employ a striking game plan against him, Strickland and Adesanya. Remember, this guy hasn't even had 10 fights, and all of a sudden, he's going to be in there with the very best middleweights on the planet. It's not that he can't beat some of them, but the stylistic matchups are pretty rough. But continuing at middleweight is only one option. The other, which is probably more likely, is to attempt to rebuild himself as a light heavyweight. You don't need to be a genius to know that Pereira's days at middleweight are numbered. That weight cut he makes to get down to 185 limit is a tough one, and Pereira is without question just about as big as a middleweight could ever feasibly get. If he does decide to make his time at middleweight shorter than expected, being forced up to light heavyweight on a loss to Izzy could well put him in a very difficult position. We saw how someone like Jan Blachowicz was able to defeat Israel Adesanya, not just because of his own striking, but with his wrestling and overall physicality too. Pereira's caught between a rock and a hard place, so unless he pulls off another miracle win, he might be looking at a very difficult next few fights. But what do you think of the UFC 287 main event? Will Israel Adesanya finally get the win over his great rival, or will it be Alex Pereira who moves to 4-0? And do you believe that a loss for Poatan could prove fatal for his career as a fighter? Let us know what you think below in the comment section.